Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here on Jacob Sports. I'm your host, Xander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mack, John McMullen. John, how you doing on this Football Friday? Short week for us, brother, but the Birds got out on the football field this week for OTAs. How you feeling this morning, John?
Gloomy, because it's always evidently the sun is never coming out locally, but other than that, seasonal, what do they call it? Seasonal affective disorder? I don't know, but be nice to see some nice weather. Hopefully we get it next week. Hopefully we'll likely be back in there Tuesday, and hopefully it'll be outside. So we'll see if the weather can give us a break next week. But positive to see that, if you think about it, that's raising the curtain on the 2025 Eagles. That first OTA practice open to reporters. So
right.
From that standpoint, always good to get the first look.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like much surprised us, John, from that first open curtain reveal, as you put it. Sometimes when there's a curtain drop or a curtain raise, or whatever you want to put it, there's a surprise. Not many surprises so far with this team. I think most of the stuff is business as usual.
Yeah, well, it's a very good team. I mean, it starts there. There's not a lot of questions, certainly on the offensive side of the football. Really only one from the standpoint of the starting lineup. After they work things out with Dallas Goedert. Defensively, a lot more questions, but we know, Nick Sirianni's been around long enough now that we know the way he thinks and the way the organization thinks in this era. And they're going to make the younger players prove it. So there's little things like Andrew Mukuba getting significant first team snaps, even though Reed Blankenship wasn't there, he wouldn't have. But, you could tell they were trying to get him up to speed as quickly as possible for a potential role early in the season. Adoree Jackson starting in front of Kelee Ringo. A little bit of surprise only because he's the veteran, yes, but he hasn't been here. And Kelee Ringo has been here for 2 seasons. So that was a little bit of a surprise to me. And then the Bryce Huff situation with June 1st coming up, we'll see what happens there. But a little bit of a surprise that he has not been at voluntary work whatsoever, which is not a positive sign, or it is, depending on a lot of Eagles fans think. I don't think they're thinking about the business end, but
from a business perspective, it's definitely not a positive sign. And the last 2 things with Bryce Huff, it was take a seat for the Super Bowl. We won't need you, and don't show up at OTAs. We don't want you permeating in the building. It's not looking good for Bryce Huff right now.
No, I don't know if that latter part is correct. But, you would think from his perspective, you would think it would be an opportunity to say, all right, the first year didn't work out, but, I'm going to prove myself. And, it could be just from one side. It could be two-sided. We don't know yet, but it's not a positive either way from the standpoint of him being here and being a contributor. He might be hidden away because of the cap ramifications, like James Bradbury last year, but not a positive. And as a younger player, I wouldn't advocate that for Bryce Huff. I mean, he's still a very young player, whereas James Bradbury's near the end of his career, hasn't signed anywhere yet. Who knows? Maybe he is at the end of his career. A little bit different for Bryce Huff. I would have advised him to put his head down and go to work, but
he's only 27, John, just turned 27.
Yeah, exactly. So, he's not going to stop playing. So, I don't think it's a positive development.
What's your feeling right now? You feel like Bryce Huff's going to be traded, cut, moved, stashed on the roster? Eat your pride if you're Howie. What's your gut feeling right now on Bryce Huff?
Well, I don't know how you trade him.
I was looking at the numbers after Ed brought that up yesterday. They're not great for the Eagles moving on from him.
No, No, that's
Yeah,
when
terrible.
we talked about voidable years earlier in the week because of Roger Goodell's comments out at the spring meeting being interpreted a certain way. This is the downside. This is the wrong side of the evaluation. When you sign somebody to significant money and you tack on all the voidable years and they don't work out, it ain't good. So if that happens more often, the Eagles have to rethink their own philosophy. But luckily, they've had a very good batting average with doing it. This one doesn't look like it's going to work out. So trade would be the best case scenario for the Eagles. But and I always say there's a lot of bad GMs out there, but are they that bad?
Yeah, right.
Know where you are with them. And like I said, he's going to keep playing. Somebody's going to give him a second opportunity, but they're not going to sign him to that contract. You're picking up that contract if you trade for him.
Now you think there's a chance the Eagles could like eat half of it or something, and then you have a chance where if you do that, another
Well,
GM might do it because you're gonna give up a seventh or something. You know what I mean? It's very low risk, and you get a guy who potentially has one trick pony ability where it hasn't worked out in Philly.
Teams who do that are usually looking for assets. The Eagles already have a crap load of draft picks. They don't need another seventh round pick. So typically they don't do business that way. They're not going to pay people to play somewhere else. So I would say from both of those standpoints, I wouldn't expect it. Would be out of character. And again, you're not those sort of NBA, Major League Baseball like deals. You're essentially trying to pay money for an asset. And usually that asset is more significant than a seventh round pick.
Right.
So I don't see the fit there either. Sometimes you just strike out and you got to accept it. But Howie's also, he's not, as he said, when he talked about stubbornness and to see how this is shaken out, the stubbornness is more about that, what I said, paying somebody to go play somewhere else or, just doing that, the Bradbury sort of path indicates they might just stash him away somewhere. But I if I'm Bryce Huff and I'm his agent, I'm like, just what he's 27 years old. Can he afford to waste the season of his career? So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out. But ultimately, I think from the Eagles' perspective, if they're going to move on, they got to cut him. They got to cut him and take the medicine.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to do that. I don't feel like they're going to do that, but we'll see what ends up happening here, John. This brings up another point another question in my head that I'm thinking about here. Do you feel like this? And maybe it's not at all. Maybe you completely dispute it, but Bryce Huff, as you and Ed talked about nicely yesterday, where he's a one-trick guy. Like let him go and do the one trick, right? And they don't seem to do that. But if you look at some of the acquisitions that this team has made on defense, if you look at the guys they've paid recently in Zach Bond, you look at Cooper DeJean, you look at who they drafted in Jahad Campbell. Yeah, do you think they're trying to get to more of a positionless player-filled defense where they have guys that are more versatile, can move around a little bit more? And it seems like the thing that they like the most, John, is they can play three downs. If they don't play three downs, outside of Jordan Davis, there's no one on the team last year that couldn't play three downs. And I wonder if they're just going that direction. And that's why even if Bryce has that one trick, it's not the player that Vic wants on the edge.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's looking for that league wide, but it's more back seven than front than the front four or the front five, depending on where you are with the Eagles. But
right.
That's more the linebackers, defensive backs, secondary guys, as far as the versatile chess pieces. Now, where Vic is a little bit more, liberal than most is with those edge defenders, Jahad Campbell, Zach Bond, their ability to rush the passer, along with coverage and flat defender. Um, that's what he wants, and maybe it works out more with Jihad Campbell when he gets healthy. Um, but I got to tell you, I mean, there aren't a lot of guys who can drop in coverage and play the edge in the NFL.
Yeah, but just 3 downs, like if Bryce can't be out there for 3 downs, like think about Josh Sweat last year, No, he's not an elite edge rusher. He doesn't do anything incredible, but he did everything well. Stopped the run well, played 3
Well,
downs
he
well, did
doesn't play
everything he
coverage.
needed to
I
do.
would say, you go all the way back to Hassan Reddick, and people lost their minds when Jonathan Gannon, who was playing Vic Fangio's scheme, dropped him into coverage.
Yeah, I remember that.
Wasn't good at it. But and Jonathan would push back, and he said he's never dropped into coverage less in his career. Now, earlier in his career, he was a linebacker, so all ball linebacker, but which was true from a number standpoint. He never dropped less, and he had his best season, but he did drop. Josh Sweat dropped last year, and people didn't like it because he ain't good at it. It's funny, and Ed and I were talking about overreactions. The first snap, Azeez Ojulari was asked to drop, and he looked like a fish out of water. I mean, it ain't easy for those guys, and it is more of a changeup. It's not like Vic's mentality is go cover this back out of the backfield. No, you're trying to fool the quarterback. It's the old Dom Capers zone blitz. You're trying to, essentially rush one guy you don't expect and drop another guy you do expect to come, and you hope to fool the quarterback. That's the whole philosophy. Right. But yeah, who do people expect to be? You're going to be incensed when Azeez Ojulari drops or Josh Uche drops. I'm talking fans. I mean, it's more of a change up. So I'm like, that's where I very rarely disagree with Vic, but in this instance, I'd be like, yeah, I don't have any problem having a designated pass rusher. And if you want to drop him, if you want to use him as a flat defender on occasion as that changeup, well, you just suck it up and say, all right, the quarterback figures it out, or take it out of the playbook, whatever you have to do. Now, if you can get Andrew Van Ginkel, or if Jihad Campbell turns in to Andrew Van Ginkel, great. Then it's great. But
that still is a little pie in the sky, especially year one.
Yeah, but it even if it happens year 2, year 3, phenomenal. But it's not common. So to me, it's like, now the run support part of it is probably the bigger issue.
Yeah, I agree.
But again, what do you think you're getting from setting? You think Ojulari setting the edge like Josh Sweat? You think?
No, but I think Nolan Smith did it well, and I think Josh Sweat did it well last year. Boy, the more we talk about Josh Sweat, the more I'm wondering. I know you weren't paying Milton 27, but should they have just brought back Josh Sweat at this point?
They can't. I mean, they don't. They have too many good players, like we said. And when people start talking about cap space and because they're going to get caps, they're going to get Darius Slay's cap space. The post June 1st guys, James Bradbury, are the 2 post June 1st designations. So their cap hits were carried this entire time, and they're going to get that relief on June 2nd, which is like 6.4 million. But even that, people don't understand. So there's a rule, the offseason rule, it's called the top 51 rule. Only the top 51 paid players on your roster count against the salary cap in the offseason. That's how you can't keep 90 guys under. Right. So the top 51. So what most people don't calculate in, Slay and Bradbury are in the top 51. So they drop off. That means the next 2 that are out, which in the Eagles' case is Moro Jomo and Anaya Smith, they will be moving up to the top 51. They make just over $1 million each. So 2.07 million So that's 6.2 million of space minus 2.07 million. So I think a lot of people miss that.
Right.
You have to look at both ends and then calculate it. But then the second part is like the assumption is the salary cap is always about now, always about now, always about now. And Eagles fans should know better by now. It's not about necessary. It's not about making space to get a player. It could be about Jalen Carter next year. It could be about Nolan Smith next year. It could be about Quinyon Mitchell 2 years down
Right.
the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding me?
Um,
Quinyon and
so
Cooper are going to come up at the same time.
so it's not always, it's a much bigger picture that Howie and Bryce Johnson deal with, and it's usually 3 years, a 3-year sort of conglomeration. And not that, again, if guys falter and they get through this portion of the off season and they say Makuba's not ready and Sidney Brown's not good enough, and they say the edges aren't good enough, they might have to go outside the organization and get somebody, but they're not specifically creating space for that.
What's your feeling on when the stuff we talked about earlier this week with the cap that the NFL is talking about with getting or handling void years differently? What's your feeling on when that will come into effect and start to impact the Eagles?
Oh, it might never come into effect. I mean, that's just that's what the NFL, that's what the owners want, and that's collective bargaining with the union, and they will talk about that when they open up negotiations for the 18-game schedule. All of that will come up and be involved with the negotiations, the discussions, but there's no guarantee that, because the whole point of the owners is salaries. The salaries have spiked to the point where they're uncomfortable.
It might be unsustainable too. I mean, 5 years ago, Carson Wentz was the highest paid player at 32. Now we're at 60. I mean, we've doubled from 32 to 60.
But also the cap keeps going up. I mean, it's now they have been undisciplined with part of it, and that's what they want to reel it in and become a little bit more disciplined. But obviously, the union's going to fight in the opposite direction, and they're the ones giving up something for the 18th game, so they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep salaries up. So there's no guarantee it's going anywhere. But I do think the voidable year aspect of it is sort of what maybe the union won't care about because it doesn't affect them as long as they can keep salaries. And if that's the case, then it becomes much more difficult to manage the cap. And then it changes. But the Eagles, if you're smart, you're smart.
And but I still feel like they're going to do what they can to level the playing field, even if it's not, even if what we've done isn't unfair, it's just good business. I still feel like they're going to try and even the playing field.
Well, they're trying to even the playing field for the owners who can't, don't have the financial wherewithal to do that.
Right.
And if they get it accomplished, it will change things. Yes. And the Eagles will have to do things a different way, but they're smarter than everybody now for the most part. Couple people are in the conversation, but and they'll be smarter than same thing with Vic Fangio being a good coach before he won the Super Bowl, being a good coach after he won the Super Bowl.
Right.
They're the smartest before, they'll be the smartest after. That won't change. Just the way business is done will change. And if that even happens again, but it's a negotiation with the union, which obviously wants salaries to stay where they are. And to be honest, they want to grow them because they're playing an extra game. So that's a tough road to hoe for the owners.
Listen, I mean, I get that they'll still be the smartest team, but it is going to affect them a lot more than other teams. I mean, you pointed out how much
they use it more.
Yeah, they use it a lot more, right? I mean, you give 10 people an advantage, John, in anything, and one guy figures out how to use it double, anybody else, and then you take that advantage away, it affects that guy the most. So I think the Eagles are going to be affected the most by it, but we'll see how it all shakes out with that.
Well,
It's gonna be
the only pushback I'd have to that is the Eagles have a bunch of good players. Like they don't do it just to do it. Like they do it with their good.
Yeah, but can they
players.
get that many good players if they weren't able to do what they do with the void years? Like right now, they have Devontae, AJ, Saquon, the 4 offensive
Well,
linemen who are Pro Bowl, Jalen
what
Hurts. Like, can they get all those players in the room on the team at the same time if they don't have the rules that allowed them to do that up to this point?
Probably not, but already it's affecting them, and they do have the rules to where they're losing good players. That's the nature of the NFL. And at some point, because it is cyclical, when guys age out or start descending, you're not always going to have this many good players. So part of it, unfortunately, will take care of itself, just because of the nature of the industry. But they've already, as you said, they've already lost Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and Darius Slay because they couldn't pay them. Basically,
Right.
That's what it comes down to. And that's with the current incarnation. They have too many good players. Like this is not a concern for most teams because they're not worried about paying that many good players because they don't have that many good players. They have too many good players, which is a nice problem.
Which is part of the reason that it's going to affect the Eagles more because they have so many damn good players who need to get paid money. And if you get rid of some of those cap rules, or
it might hurt you.
The strings,
a Saquon Barkley type situation where you go out of the organization, it might hurt you there in free agency. Look, if you draft good players, continue, and again, we've talked about the odds of that continuing. At some point, the odds are going to catch up to you. I don't know when, I don't know where, but at times, and you've already seen it this year. I mean, they didn't sign any free agents other to even a 2-year deal. Everything's 1 year. Everything's Temu. It already started, so I don't think it's going to be that dramatic of a shift if it happens. If it even happens, and it might not even happen. But I do know they want to get the void years. Again, it's gone from 40 million in 2013 to 2.2 billion. I think they want to get that. And remember, the Eagles are a large portion of that, just under 400 million. But guess what? That's 1.8 billion that isn't the Eagles. They want to get it under control from an entire league process.
Definitely from a league standpoint, but the Eagles are eating up a big portion of that, which is still notable for sure. But I hear what you're saying, Johnny. Matt, good stuff there. Well, we got plenty to talk about here with the OTAs kicking off this week. The other thing that's on the docket here, John, coming up this weekend is June 1st. All right, the June 1st is, I believe, Sunday is June 1st. So that's a big day in the NFL where people wait to make moves or contract ramification or implications change for certain players, really for every player. But anything to look out for? Anything on your mind as June 1st is right on the horizon here, John?
Well, I just mentioned they're going to get some cap space with Slay and Bradbury. They're post June 1st designations, so that's been carried this entire time. Their cap numbers, which for Slay is pretty significant, 13.765 million. Bradbury was 5.195 million. Now, the Eagles aren't getting all of that because of the contract and the void years and all that kind of stuff. They're getting 4.324 back for Slay, 2.1 for Bradbury. So again, about 6.4, but then you go down to the bottom of the top 51. They drop out. That means 2 pop in, and that's Moro Ajomo, who makes 1.049 million. Anaya Smith, who makes 1.043 million. They're next. So 6.4 million minus that 2.08 million is the space they gain. They already worked things out with Dallas Goedert, so you don't have to worry about that. Bryce Huff would be the only player. Some implications, and look, there's no good scenario from a business perspective for the Eagles with Bryce Huff. That's what happens when you miss
Right.
on a player. There's no good scenario. Question is, do they want to eat the money right away? Trade, you can talk about it, and hey, maybe there's some dumb team out there. I don't know. But remember, if they trade for him, they're picking up his contract. So you're not going to get anything. And even if the Eagles pick up part of the contract, which again is not their way of typically doing business, more of an NBA sort of salary dump, you generally only do that for more significant assets. It's not going to be significant either way. And the cut post June 1st, you lose $12.364 million of cap space. So you talk about gaining that $4 million. Well, you lose $12 million plus if you just cut Bryce Huff.
So. Not good there. And you think they add a player? You think they go veteran edge rusher? You think they improve the room that Johnny Mac's been concerned about all offseason? What do you think they do at June 1? Or maybe nothing at all?
I find it hard to believe they were going into the season with, Nolan Smith and Azeez Ojulari, Jelix Hunt as their top edge rushers. I still find it hard to believe. So it wouldn't surprise me if they go outside the organization there. Safety, it's more about, Mukuba and Sidney Brown. I think they'll give them legitimate chances. But Vic makes decisions quickly. If he says they're not ready, then maybe they have to go outside the organization there.
Going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. June 1, right around the corner. OTAs kicked off this week. Plenty of conversation here about the Philadelphia Eagles. I got a bunch of questions. We got 2 super chats we'll get to, and then we'll get to our first commercial break. And then when we come back, it's time to dive in. Biggest winner of OTAs, concerning absences, all sorts of different things to talk about when it comes to the OTAs that kicked off this week. JD3 checks in. What's up, JD3? Appreciate it, brother. He says, Huff robbed Lurie out of $50 million and got a Super Bowl ring. We should be able to delegate that money to players who show up. Disappointment from week 1. That's not how the business works, JD3.
That's not how it works, JD. Sorry. If it's in butts for candy and nuts, what does this say? I mean, that's you misevaluate on a player. You spend a lot of money. You got to pay the price. The Eagles are out. That's how it works.
If every team could just not give the money to the players that don't work out, man, there'd be a lot of unhappy people in this league, and it wouldn't quite work so well. Fredo checks in. What's up, Fredo? Johnny Mac has swagger like Vic Fangio. Look at that, John. That's a big compliment right there, man.
Yeah, thank you. It comes with no, I don't have but big swagger. I can talk about big swagger. It comes from confidence in what he's doing. So, like, Vic doesn't give a rat's ass what anybody else thinks, because he believes in what he's doing. He knows what he's doing, and that's when it comes to when a subject, you have confidence in the subject. Basically.
No doubt. And Vic's got swag. Johnny Mac's got swag. Appreciate the super chat, Fredo. Vic, good stuff there. Plenty of stuff to talk about here on the OTAs. I thought we got into some good stuff there. When we come back, I do want to talk about Jelix Hunt as well. Big expectations for Jelix Hunt this year. I think we need him to, based on the way the edge rusher room looks right now. So we'll talk about him. Plenty of other conversations, or plenty of other topics when we get back. We got an opened up show. So in hour number 2, for any of you guys who have chats, super chats, questions, comments, concerns on the Philadelphia Eagles, or questions about OTAs, if you put them in the chat, we will take some of those questions in hour number 2. So appreciate all of you guys being here. Hit that like button here on Birds 365. We'll be right back in 3 minutes.
The following is a real testimonial from the father of a young injured victim.
I didn't think she was going to make it.
Major Perry's daughter was the victim of a horrific accident caused by someone else's negligence.
If you don't find the right counselor, law firm that you're looking for, you will get lost in the wilderness.
Badly injured? Call the Fritz and Bianculli Law Firm at 215-458-2222 and find out why they say, "We got this."
Your financial future is on the line. Are you ready for what's next? At Leone & Company Wealth Management, we help young professionals, business owners, and pre-retirees navigate the complexities of building and protecting wealth. For young professionals, we'll help you grow your wealth, plan for your future, and make the most of your hard-earned dollars. For business owners, we provide strategies to protect your company, manage risks, and create a lasting legacy for both your business and personal wealth. For pre-retirees, we'll design a plan to secure your retirement, ensuring you can live comfortably and confidently in your next chapter. Whether you're just starting out, managing a thriving business, or preparing for retirement, we're here to help you take control of your financial future. The first consultation is on us. Get the advice you need without the cost. Let's make your financial vision a reality. Take the next step. Scan the QR code to schedule your free consultation today. And of course, go Birds.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
In our hometown, we all look out for each other. We step up to keep our communities going strong. And at Independence Blue Cross, we're here to keep you going strong as the #1 health insurer in the region. No IBX is always looking out for you.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here on Jacob Sports. I'm your host, Xander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mack, John McMullen. Give us follows on X at Real Xander, and for Johnny Mack at JF McMullen. John, I want to talk about this edge rusher room. We talked about it a little bit with Bryce Huff in the open, obviously. And if we just assume for a second that Bryce Huff has little to no role on this team, this edge rusher room is as thin gets. Now, it looks a little better if Jalix Hunt steps up. What do you think of Jalix Hunt? Are we putting too many eggs in the Jalix Hunt basket right now, or does he have a real chance to break out? Because I think he has a chance to break out with this team this year.
Well, I think he's got a chance to break out. You know, sometimes all it takes is an opportunity. You saw that last year with Jalix. I mean, he didn't play at all, basically, early in the season. Had a handful of snaps really through week 8. I think the number was like under 20 through week 8, you know, and then the injuries cropped up and he had to play basically. And I remember talking to Bick about it. He's like, well, we're going to see. He's ready. And he held up pretty well. And I think probably the most intriguing part of it is he held up against the run better. Everybody thinks of him as a pass rusher. I think he was ahead as a run defender, at least from Bick's perspective, setting the edge. Because I think he's got a very unique frame. He's very long. And I think offensive linemen have difficulty sort of gauging that. And really, he was playing on first and second down more than as a pass rusher, which is his long-term upside. But he's got everything from a physical standpoint. He's very long, as I said, big wingspan. His frame, there's more ability to add weight to it without losing that speed. So that's a positive. But he's very raw. And that's what he was talking about. It. We were talking to him after OTAs. He knows it. He talked about it last year. He talked about it again. Like he couldn't snip the quarterback going against Lane Johnson. Not that a lot of people do, but he laughs about it. He's like, you can't get within 4 yards of the quarterback. And Lane is helping him and saying, hey, do this, try this, do that kind of thing. So as he gets his technique better, he calls it his pass rushing bag. You got to have a plan. He'll get better and better. My problem is expecting it right away. He ended up playing 339 snaps last year, which is more than anybody expected because of those injuries. But, and he showed, and he held up pretty well, but to take the leap to, all right, Josh Sweat, you got to be Josh Sweat. Yeah, I don't see that early in the process. So, and if I were betting and they don't add somebody, I still think it would be Ojulari and Smith as the starters. And like I said, we don't
That's trouble.
like
Ojulari is a starter. I that can't be good, can it?
Well, I don't think. I don't think it's going to be great. Can you persevere? Other guys got to step up. Maybe the pass rush has got to come more from the interior. Maybe you have to play guys like Jalen Carter outside a little bit more than you want to. Maybe you do it that way. But yeah, on paper it doesn't look great. And we skip over Nolan. Like Nolan has to be the guy he was.
Better
for any of this. And by the guy he was, I mean the final 9 games.
Yep.
He has to do that for an entire season for any of it to even potentially work. He's got to be that guy. He's got to be 12 to 15 sacks. He's got to be a star for any of the stuff to even have a chance to work. And can you get to that point? I think everybody's skipping over that.
I mean, to your point though, if he's not that, John, and then you have a mediocre Nolan Smith next to Azeez Ojulari, oh gosh, that edge rusher room is going to be a big problem. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Nolan's going to have a decent year, going to have a good year.
Yeah, and health comes in. That's one thing about OTAs, because guys miss and guys aren't there. And when guys aren't there, and you see what it looks like when they're not there, you go, oof. Reed Blankenship's not there. You go, what the hell? Nolan is not practicing. It looks, Jalix Hunt, Azeez Ojulari, that was your starting edge rushers. And some you say, maybe Trotter can hold up at linebacker. Wide receiver, you say, I like Dotson probably more than anybody else in Philadelphia. I'm like, I think he'd be fine. You saw it in the Giants game when they sat everybody. He produced. Yeah, I think you're back to the level of where you were before pre-AJ Brown and pre-Devontae Smith, but I think you're better than Travis Fulgham and Greg Ward level. So, but you see when and the offensive line, even with no Lane, no Cam Jurgens, no Landon Dickerson, all of a sudden, The quickest way to derail any season is injuries, obviously, in the NFL. But all you have to do is go back to Doug Peterson's last season. They had a boatload of offensive line injuries. And I say it all the time for every team, not just the Eagles. If you can't block people, it doesn't matter who you have at the skill positions.
Right.
But that's baked in with every team. You just see it when guys aren't there. And some of the positions, and I would say edge rusher being number 1, and then safety number 2. There's some question marks there.
Big time, big time. But a lot of John, a big part of this defense this year, and you just brought it up with Nolan Smith, but you're putting a lot of eggs in the basket of people improving, as well as all the rookies and all the unknown pieces. Like you just said with Nolan Smith, he has to improve. I mean, all these guys who played only 1 year, even Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. Now, I'm not concerned about them, but it wouldn't be the first time in the NFL that a rookie played better than he did his first year than he did his second year in the league. So the whole defense is kind of hinging on some of those players taking another step forward, as well as the pieces around them fitting and working.
Well, and that's the thing, BLG and I talk about that a lot, regression to the mean. Like even Zach Bond, it's not that I think Zach Bond proved himself as a player. Is he going to have the same year that he had last year? That's very unlikely.
It'd be tough for Fred Warner to have that year.
Exactly.
Again. Like that's just a hard thing to do for any player.
Now there's some guys, Jalen Carter, he can keep going up. With Quinyon, he might, I say it all the time with quarterbacks and CJ Stroud last year. Quinyon Mitchell might become a better player and have a worse year in the band's eyes because there is no Darius Slay to lean on. And now he's the guy who's got to man the left corner, and he's the guy that has to play that Slay role. And maybe it doesn't look as good. But ultimately he's growing and he's becoming a better player. So there's a lot of, as always, there's a lot of context to it, but if you just boil everything down to stats, you're probably going to be disappointed with the defensive side because look where they were last year. And if you're going to compare them to last year,
yeah, right,
it's a tough comp.
Really tough comp. 1 overall last year. What do you think they're going to be this year? 8? Too high?
Right now it's too high. We'll see how things develop if they bring somebody in. You make one move and you're right back cooking. Like I don't know how you pull it off, and I don't want to get everybody.
Really? What's that one move? Just a big edge rusher, you think?
Yeah. Because everything falls into place. And then Smith is the complement. And then Hunt is a rising rotational player. Everything falls into place.
How's that factor in though with what we talked about earlier with the salary cap and the moves like that? I mean, can they, like I said to you earlier though, if they need to go get an established edge or trade for one or sign one or whatever the case may be, I don't know how many are even available in the open market. You probably have to trade for one at this point. Shit, man, should we have just brought back Josh Sweat? And again, I understand that, it didn't really work like that. They weren't able to do it, but now we're sitting here, one day post OTA, and we're like, this edge rusher room is not very good.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it's finding that CJ Gardner-Johnson like player who hasn't broke out yet, but is going to break out. They tried that last year with Bryce Huff. It didn't work. So it's far easier said than done. Trey Hendrickson's the one where you go, would he play under his current contract here for a chance to win a Super Bowl? I doubt it. But I'm just saying from a pie in the sky, pure football perspective, there's the type of everything falls into place if you get a player like that. And everybody's in the position they should be in. I always go back to Jordy Nelson in Green Bay when he was an all-pro, and they just looked like gangbusters. And then he got hurt. And I think Randall Cobb was at the time was a very good secondary receiver, wide receiver too. And then everybody had to bump up one, and they just looked like a mess without the centerpiece. So I think the Eagles would be fine if they could find that centerpiece, but I don't know how you find it at this point. Yeah.
It's going to be tough. We'll see what ends up happening there with the defense. Plenty of questions here still in the OTAs this week. We're going to get into some of those questions. I do want to stay on the defense for a little bit here. I'll take one super chat here. Let's get this out of the way. Stu O'Blaze, what's up, brother? Hope you're doing well on this Football Friday. Football Friday. This week went quick, John. I guess we only had 4 shows, so it makes sense. But Huff puts cuffs on us with making a big trade. And I do think there's some ramifications from that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Huff didn't put cuffs on you. The Eagles did by paying him.
Well, like you always talk about, it wasn't a bad contract by them.
No.
The player didn't work out. So
when you misevaluate, this is what happens. But everything is hit for the Eagles. They're on this great run, this heater, and this is the one outlier. It could have been a different player. And that's the risk you take when you're not only paying a player top of the market money, but also, and really Huff's not even top of the market, but significant money. And then you tack on voidable years to make it more palatable from a current standpoint, so you can build the best roster. So it's a give and take. In this particular player, they seem to have given up on him. And that's going to hurt him from a business standpoint.
Yep.
And it already has. It's one of the again, look at who they signed this offseason. Bargain. Tamu. Not 1 2-year contract. Everybody's 1 year. Everybody.
Yep.
And the edge rushers they brought in from a 1-year perspective, Ojulari and Uche, I think they're worthy lottery tickets. I think
but they're lottery tickets. They can't be used as cornerstones of your defense.
No, exactly. But is there a chance that Ojulari stays healthy and can rush the passer? And can get 10 sacks, which yeah, I think so. Where I would argue with Vic, and most people don't argue with Vic, well, he ain't going to be a 3-down player either.
No.
So, again, and maybe a lot of eggs are in Jihad Campbell's basket, whenever he's healthy. He might be the guy.
That's a tough gauge. I can't get a gauge on when to expect him back. Is it week 4, week 8, week 14? Is he a redshirt year? Like I can't get a gauge.
I don't think he's a redshirt year, but I think if you use Cooper again, Cooper missed 3 weeks of training camp with a hamstring that he hurt getting ready for training camp. And he didn't play until after the bye week, which was week 6. And part of it was learning a new position. But in the case of Campbell, if they're expecting him to help as an off-ball linebacker and an edge rusher or a pass rusher, which seems to be the plan, well, he's got some learning to do. So I think best case scenario is significant snaps, probably, week 5, week 6.
That'd be pretty early. I'd be happy with that. We'll see what ends up happening there.
Now, I just want to throw in, sometimes when there's necessity, like they had Avonte Maddox to play in the slot while people, didn't like Avonte at the end. they were very comfortable with him as a veteran who understood how to play and all that kind of stuff. If they don't have somebody to play, that might force them into playing like Jalen Hunt last year. You know, they didn't want to play Jalen Hunt, but a bunch of guys got hurt and I had to throw them in there. So necessity can change things as well.
Interesting. We'll see what ends up happening there. Plenty of stuff to talk about on that defense, John. Moving to the back end of that defense, talked a little bit about Cooper DeJean. Cornerback 2, the battle there is going to be interesting. I happen to think, John, my gut feeling, and maybe I'm way off. I'm not in the building. I don't talk to, the players, so I don't know. But I feel like Cooper DeJean has a good chance to be moved outside this year. Now, maybe it's early. Maybe they don't want to go that route yet. I understand why people say to not do that because of how good he was in the slot last year and what he did for the defense when he came in week 6, as you just mentioned. But I got a feeling in my gut that he could be moved outside this year. Am I far off?
Well, he's going to play outside when they only have 2 cornerbacks on the field. So he's going to play some. I do think they can buy one more year of playing him the majority. Ultimately, he's going outside. I'm sorry, fans. That's just the nature of the business again. It's the business aspect.
There, yeah.
And people can talk about, well, the Eagles, and Ed talked about it yesterday. It's not, the difference is 90 million versus 40 million. Top tier outside corner versus slot corner. Could the Eagles wake up and say, hey, we're going to pay Cooper like he's an outside corner? I guess. But that's the history of this business does not say that. So ultimately he's going to get a chance to play outside. And I go back to they scouted him as an outside corner. He played outside corner at Iowa. They brought him in as an outside corner. So they definitely think he can play outside corner. So that factors into it as well. Obviously, last year he was blocked by 2 significant players, 6-time Pro Bowl cornerback, potential future Hall of Famer, and a first-round pick. All right. One of them's gone. So you have an opening. And to me, it comes down to you also don't have Avonte Maddox to play in the slot. So, they don't have a backup slot right now, or at least one you're confident in. Obviously, they line up people there. Guys like Perry Nickerson, who are not going to be probably on the team, other than practice squad, potentially again. So, the thought is Kelee Ringo, if he's ready to go, I do think they're going to buy one more year with Cooper in the slot, but that'll be it. So would it surprise me if he's playing outside this year? No, but I still lean towards, I think Ringo or Adoree Jackson will do enough to buy one more year for the Eagles. And then probably next year it's outside.
How do you feel about that position group with the way it is now then? Based on what you just said, based on what your expectation is that as big of a concern as it feels like it is to me? I mean, I think the edge is the bigger concern, but that secondary was big last year, man. That secondary did a lot of good things that allowed that defense to operate the way it did. What's your concern level or not on that secondary?
Well, there's a concern. I mean, the secondary as a whole, there's a big concern because you're replacing 2 big-time players in Slay and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. But I'm more concerned with safety than corner. But, yeah, they're not going to be able to replace the way Slay played last season. But I have more confidence in Ringo or Adoree Jackson holding down the fort than I have with whether you're talking about an undrafted kid like BJ Mays or Brandon Johnson, because they're both slot players or projected to be slot players. McWilliams, the draft pick, they started him outside because he played outside, but he'll get work inside. I have much more confidence in Ringo and Jackson than those guys. And as I said, Perry Nickerson can play. He understands how to play, but there's limitations in the slot. So, yeah, there's a concern at corner. It's just kind of masked by more concern than safety. But, yeah, we've been talking about this all off season. The defense got to replace a lot of good players, man.
Yeah.
A lot of good players. And we don't even talk about the interior of the defensive line because everybody's excited about Moro Jomo. I include myself into that conversation. I think Moro Jomo is going to be a very good player in this league, especially getting to play next to Jalen Carter and seeing a bunch of one-on-ones. But he ain't going to be Milton Williams. Not this early. It took Milton Williams 3 years to become Milton Williams in his fourth year.
And Jomo's going into what, year 3 or year 2? No, year 3, right?
Year 3. He didn't play at all in his first year.
Played 400 snaps, I think, last year.
Yeah. And he showed a lot of positive signs, but nobody was paying attention to Moro Jomo. Like, think about it. If you're the Eagles and you got Nolan Smith the way he was playing at the end of last season, and Jalen Carter and Josh Sweat, and on and on and on. Like, nobody's paying attention to Moro Jomo. Now it's going to be a little bit different.
Him, Jordan Davis. I think they're going to want Jordan Davis. I mean, you heard Ed talking yesterday, man. Ed's optimistic on Jordan Davis being the 3-down player. I don't know if he's right or he's not.
Yeah, I say about you, not that he can't do it, because I think part of the problem is when people speculate on where he's going to be next year. Well, not next year, but for the next contract, if the Eagles can sign him or let him walk. Yeah, I get this mentality of being a 3-down player because he's the 13th pick in there. I've gotten that mentality. I think a lot of people don't understand from day one. I talked about it. My problem is, who are you taking off the field to get him on the field on 3rd and long? And why would you want that to develop? Like, if you look at it from that standpoint, is a Jomo coming off?
I mean, I would think so, right? It's not going to be Jalen Carter, obviously.
Yeah. I think a Jomo is a better pass rusher. Now, would I want a Jomo to stop the run on 1st and 10 like Jordan Davis? No. Why would I ask him to do that? Well, why would you ask Jordan Davis to be a better pass rusher than Moro Jomo? Like last year. Why? Last year was more obvious. Like, why in God's name would you take Milton Williams off the field on 3rd and long situations? Be dumb. Big's not dumb. So the goal is, to get your best 4 pass rushers on the field in 3rd and long. And if everything's healthy, obviously you got 2 obvious, Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter. And then it comes to obviously Jordan Davis isn't playing the edge, so you can wipe out whoever it is, whether it's Felix Hunt, Azeez Ojulari, Josh Uche, or somebody to be determined. You can wipe them out. So then it comes down to Moro Jomo. And then throw the curveball of Jihad Campbell into the mix, who can play all over, or that's the projection. So he can play on the edge. He could stand up inside as a joker type rusher. Like, in what world? Oh, it's 3rd and 15. Go rush the passer. In what world does any Eagles fan want Jordan Davis on the field in that situation? And I know Vic doesn't. Like
sure Howie does.
No, he doesn't.
He wants him in for the business part of it. I mean,
but even Howie's well aware of even in that. And I'm being, there's a big difference between 3rd and 15 and 3rd and 7. Maybe can he be on there more on those middle range, or it could be it's more likely pass, but it could be both. Yeah, maybe that's some improvement. but again, that's not going to be a massive part of it. So, I think the Eagles drafted him understanding that. Now, he showed some signs in the postseason. You can get better. You can get a better push. You can be more like Dexter Lawrence, yada, yada, yada. And that part they expect improvement from. And all of that is realistic. But I harken back to our original discussion about the cap. Like, if this were a normal team, it'd be like, all right, well, just play him on third down, and he's a good player, and we only have a certain amount of good players, so we're just going to pay him. Like, the Eagles have too many good players, and they got to make these tough decisions. It's easy to play 3 downs if you don't have anybody else. That I think people get hyper-focused on way too much on playing time. I use the NBA. I mean, somebody's got to play, so somebody's got to score if you're a bad team. Same thing with football. So if you can't rush the passer, somebody's got to play. But is that really what you want? Like, the Eagles want to be one of the best pass rushing teams in football. They always do. And they were last year. And they have been in the recent past. So at some point you gotta expand the mind and say, it's easy to say I want him to be a 3-down player, but at the expense of who? And who is he going to be? If you say, who's he a better pass rusher than that he's putting on the bench?
Right.
Is that Moro Ojomo? Maybe, but then Moro Ojomo fails. Is that Jihad Campbell? Maybe, but then Jihad Campbell fails. Is that really what you want?
I don't see any world then that Jordan Davis is extended here in Philly.
Well, that depends on what the Eagles are willing to value a 2-down player, a very effective 2-down player.
Again, we keep circling back to the cap conversation.
Well, the cap's a big part of the NFL.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to pay.
I don't think it's going to be able to work out because he can go to a bad team and get much more money.
Yeah, exactly.
And play 3 downs because they don't have anybody else, and they can justify the bigger contract. So that's where I am with Jordan Davis. Now you can hope for failure more, I guess, with Moro Ojomo.
I just want to see Jordan take the next step. And I'm with you where I don't know what that next step looks like. But Ed Kratz came in yesterday and gave me some optimism about him maybe being.
I love Ed to death, but it's easy to say he's got to be a 3-down player. But again, you got to look at the back end.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Yeah. How is he going to be a 3-down player? Well, who's he replacing? Who's he on the field for? That's not how the Eagles are set up projection-wise.
Right.
Now, again, guys can fail, and he can become a better pass rusher than Moro Ojomo. That's not the projection. And look, I think Eagles fans have not seen a player like they are projecting Jihad Campbell to be. So it's kind of hard to envision a stand-up interior rusher. But, if you watch some other teams, they do it all the time. And Bick did it in Miami all the time. So if he factors into this as well, that's going to change people's thinking, I think.
Yeah, I don't see the world where he's here long term then if he can't ever be that guy, but it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. John, a couple OTA questions for you. They're not going to be your favorite, but I'm going to force you to answer them anyway. And if you don't have an answer, you can tell me that as well, as you always do. Biggest winner from the OTA you were at? Any player stand out? Maybe looked a little different, just in your estimation. Biggest winner from the OTA that you saw?
Well, I'm one day I do kind of chuckle, but
Yeah, I know, but I hear you.
Makuba, I would say, because it's
Hmm.
clear the sentiment is clear. They're clearly trying to get him up to speed. Like it's obvious. So he's going to get every opportunity, I think, to be a day one starter. Doesn't mean he's going to succeed, but um, they rolled him in with everybody. So he's not only getting first team reps right away, he was working with a bunch of different partners, which indicates to me that they're looking, you know, they're trying to speed him up as quickly as possible. And so I would say he's the guy who was the biggest winner, I guess.
Yeah, well, I like it. I mean, that's good sign though. Obviously, you think he's gonna have the biggest impact of the draft picks this year?
Depends how quickly Campbell's on the field. I mean,
Well, based on the conversation we had a little earlier on the show, I don't think Campbell's on the field earlier than what, week 6, week 8,
yeah,
week
but
7.
you can do a lot of stuff. Cooper did
Yeah.
a lot of stuff.
That's true.
Yeah, I think Campbell obviously is tremendously talented, and if he's playing that dual role, if he's playing he's going to make splash plays. He's going to excite people. I still think Campbell has a chance, and he's clearly the most talented player, obviously. But so I would still lean towards Campbell, but. As far as day one starter, yeah, Makuba has the best chance by far.
I like it. John, what's your eyeball test? Anybody stick out eyeball test? Look different. I'm talking, you talk about body transformations of players when they get to the NFL. TJ Edwards is one we talked about a lot. Nakobe Dean had it a little bit. Nolan Smith, I think, is having it a little bit. Anybody stick out from that perspective at OTA for you?
No, but more of that happens more when you're up closer to them and you see what they've done and in the locker room and stuff like that, which we're not in the locker room yet. We won't be in the locker room till basically, before week 1 is when they open the locker room now. Years ago, we were in there basically, for training camp, or at least it was different. We used to be able to grab guys all the time, but so it's kind of hard other than H.A. Dillon's quads and, things that stand out like that. But Jay Alexander is somebody I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Because he, like I said, when we were talking about him, he's got the frame to add weight. And he's a crazy story. He's playing safety at Cornell. And, 3 years later, he's an edge rusher in the NFL.
Right.
So he's got crazy athleticism and length and everything you need to be a big time pass rusher. Track guy, former track guy, all the speed in the world. But he's just raw. And part of that is also, getting strong enough to deal with the Lane Johnsons of the world, which it's always fun to hear Alex talk about Lane Johnson. He can't snip the quarterback against Lane.
Well, yeah. Welcome to everybody in the league, dude. Guy hasn't given up a sack in how many years? I think he gave up 1 last year, but he's pretty unbelievable, Lane Johnson.
Yeah. But that's helping him. I always go back to Jordan Mailata and Joe Osman, man.
Yeah.
Joe used to beat him like a drum. And now he's Jordan Mailata. So, taking those lumps against players like Lane can really, really help you. And I think they already did in his rookie season. So he's getting better and better, but especially with the technique, because that's his weak point. And, Lane's helping him. And Nolan's talked about it as well from that perspective, and Jordan as well, Jordan Mailata. But yeah, that's a positive. That's an underrated positive of some of these young edge rushers getting to go against Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata.
Yeah, absolutely. That should teach you something. It's like reminds me of the great school, the great colleges. The guys that Georgia players and Alabama players practice against are better than half the teams they play in the league. You know what I
Well,
mean?
that
So
was
you go,
my you as an Alabama guy know that was my thought process on Campbell when I said,
yeah,
and this is before the Eagles drafted him. To me, when I looked at the film, I said he looks more like an edge rusher to me. Doesn't look like an off-ball linebacker to me. Now, obviously, you dominate because it's Alabama. They dominate 90% of their schedule, or they did.
yeah,
When
they're falling off a little bit. I'm
when
going to
Nick
not be able to
was
use
there,
them anymore.
I'm talking the Nick
Yeah,
Saban Alabama. But he moved from edge rusher to off-ball linebacker because Dallas Turner and Will Anderson were there. I mean, we got to play. It's the same thing as Georgia. They're trying to get him on the field. And then Howie started talking about, Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter and guys who played off ball at Penn State and our edge rushers now. Yeah, to me, he looks like an edge rusher, but we'll see. We'll see how it develops.
going to be interesting to see how he shakes out there. Yeah, unfortunately for the Alabama fans in the chat, if there is any, and I obviously went there, so I'm an Alabama fan. They're falling off, John. It's going to have to be Georgia, Ohio State, and some of these other teams now. It can no longer be Alabama listed at the top. But Jahad Campbell was one of the last guys that was a true Nick Saban guy at Alabama.
Yeah, well, he was a Nick Saban guy,
Yes,
and he had to move because of who was in front of him. That's all I'm trying to say. Like if Anderson wasn't there and Turner weren't there, he would have never moved, and people would be having a completely different discussion. But anyway, I digress.
Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, I do want to talk a little offense. A lot of defense so far here in this we get this Football Friday edition of Birds 365, but we got to talk some offense, and we'll do that coming up next here on Birds 365. Let me make sure we got all of our super chats. Here we go. Started off with some offense talk from our man Rashid Mixon. Checks in. Good morning, guys. Regression of the mean. Hurts was 12th, 4th, 6th ranked quarterback from 21 to 23. In 24, he was 23rd. In 25, will we see a regression to the mean there, J-Mac? Good question.
Yeah, I've said pretty consistently, if you rate Jalen Hurts' seasons as a starter, last season was not his best. I think quarterback evaluation is broken. He was much better in his best season was 2022. Then I would say 2023. And I think 2024 a little bit better than his first season as a starter where he was learning, but you can make an argument that he wasn't, but he won the Super Bowl. So, people forget all the bad stuff. I think he will be better this year. I think he will be better this year than he was last year. That doesn't mean they're going to win the Super Bowl again. I think he will perform better at his job this year because I don't think there were large pockets where he did not play well last season. And I know people don't like to hear that, but it's truth. And you all know
some of that brought on, though, John, by the way they played offense. Like when you have a running back like Saquon, and I'm not excusing Jalen. I don't disagree with you. I think there were moments he didn't play great last year, but when you're not like a high-powered passing offense, do you get in rhythm? You know what I mean? Like he had Saquon Barkley. The guy ran for 2,000 yards, so I think he wasn't fully in rhythm all the time last year. Now, that might not be a good excuse, but do you think that had anything to do with it?
Well, he got better. One of the reasons they scaled back, which I thought was unfair, was because of the way Jalen was playing early in the season, turning it over too much. Remember, they were very concerned with the turnovers. They wanted to, and everybody knows the bye week. Lane came in and Jordan came in. Let's run the ball, yada yada, and it worked. So yes, statistically, but I'm not worried about statistics as much as I'm worried about, playing the position. And he did not have a great season last year. The great last 2 games of the season, which kind of skews. But from his standard and what he had done previously in 2022 and 2020, even 2023. But yes, obviously going that run, they've always been a run heavy team. I mean, they were a run heavy team with Miles. They were a run heavy team with DeAndre. It just went to another level. And they've always been very effective running the football. And Jalen's a big part of that, by the way. But yeah, there were too many games. And again, people don't want to talk about it, but Tampa. And again, context of that was no Lane, no AJ, no Devontae. The Giants and the first game against the Giants, which they won pretty significantly, but it's the Giants, and I don't know. They threw for 114 yards or whatever the hell it was. Then there was that lull, the Rams game, which was all Saquon, the Baltimore game, which was a tremendous win, but boy, it was ugly from a quarterback standpoint. Carolina, which might have been the ugliest game of the year. So that was back to back to back. And a lot of people say, why are they that one? Remember, that was back to back to back when all the frustration started to bubble up about the passing game. So you had 179, 118, and 108 back to back to back in the passing game. And then came the Pittsburgh game, and everybody breathed a sigh of relief. Then he got hurt. And the first 2 games in the playoffs, brutal from a passing perspective. Brutal. And then the final 2 games were off the charts good from an efficiency standpoint. And that's what you're looking for, that kind of efficiency. Now, you can't be – there's both ends of the spectrum. You can't throw for 108 yards against Carolina, and you can't always be that efficient like Washington, Kansas City. But you want to be, you want to be 2022 Jalen Hurts. And I think he will be better next year. I think there will be less down moments on the EKG next year. And I think a lot of it will be back, to be honest. Kevin Patullo talked about this. They were trying to change a lot of things early last season.
Yeah, I also feel like, and I understand your point, but I don't think the team called on him to be that 22 Jalen last year. And honestly, John, I think that's one of the positive attributes of Jalen Hurts, especially through the first 4 years. The team has asked him to be a different quarterback each year. All 4 years he started. 2 of those years resulted in him nearly going the distance. 1 year he got the job done. He played 2 of his best games in those big moments. But I don't think the team called on him for him to be that guy last year. And to my point earlier, that's why I don't think he ever found the rhythm that he did in 22 or even 23 for that matter. Now, maybe it looks better this year, or it looks different, or defenses play Saquon like Spags did, and they call on him to be that quarterback this year. But I think he's fit perfectly what the team has needed him to be, regardless of what it's looked like.
Well, and when they won the Super Bowl, I get that perspective, but I thought it was unfair, and I've said it pretty consistently. I said it at the time. I thought it was unfair to Jalen Hurts what they did during the bye week. However, it was extremely successful, so It's hard to make that argument. But the fact that they felt they had to do that is not a positive sign for the quarterback. And it worked. So nobody's going to complain, but you saw in the little pockets of frustration, which came from everybody. Forget about me, forget about the haters, blah, blah, blah. Forget about the disrespect, the Magic disrespect. In the locker room, forget about AJ. It was Devontae. It was Lane. It was Jalen Hurts himself. I got news for you. because they won, that's all masked. It existed. So to the commenter's point, it was not his best season individually. I think anybody who says that is caught up in the recency bias of the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, it definitely
and the
wasn't his
Super
best
Bowl.
season. Yeah, where my contention would be is that I don't think the team wanted him to have his best. Well, obviously, based on the way they
Well,
changed.
they
after
wanted.
bye
They
week,
started it. They started wanting him to be that, and they ended up. You're right. So is that good or bad?
Well, it's good because the team was successful, but I understand what you're saying from a personal player perspective on Jalen Hurts. But the pushback I have on that is in 22, they didn't have Saquon Barkley, and he did lead them to the Super Bowl because they required him to be a different quarterback that year. In 23, obviously everything fell off the rails after week 12 or whatever it was. But, if this team needs Jalen to step up and be more of a passer this year, I have seen nothing to prove that he couldn't do it outside of the first 4 games last year, which I don't know, not a big enough sample size for me to phone
Well,
it
it's
in.
a big enough sample size for the Eagles.
Well, they also had Saquon in the O-line, though. That's why I don't want to put a number on this passing game this year because, yeah, obviously you don't want to be bottom 5 in anything, but shit, if Saquon Barkley runs for 2,000 yards again, which I don't think is going to happen, and you have that offensive line, which they are bringing back, shoot, who cares what the passing game is? It might be low because that's what they're asking Jalen to do. And I think Jalen does a great job at doing that where other quarterbacks maybe don't handle different roles as well. I'm a passer. I can throw the ball. That's what I do great.
Everything, everything week to week changes in the NFL, but they still have Saquon Barkley. They still have that offensive line, and that's what they're going to lean on. Because there's no reason not to. And they're the best team in football doing that. So they're going to do it again. But there will be moments, you can't just say everybody's going to play like Kansas City did. A, because it didn't work. It didn't remotely work. B, there's a bunch of crappy teams who are not capable of even doing it or trying to do it. So you have you'll have even if the schedule looks daunting now, trust me, you're going to have a bunch of crappy teams on the schedule, starting with the Giants. Poor Giants. So, everything in the NFL changes week to week. And one of the best attributes of Jalen Hurts, I agree with, is his ability to put the bad stuff behind him, like the Carolina game, and go out and perform. He even does it in game. He makes a play. He plays poorly. I say it all the time, plays poorly, and then makes a play in the fourth quarter and puts you over the top. That's his greatest trait to me, to be honest. His relentlessness. I say it all the time. Usually if you're having a bad game as a quarterback in the NFL, like a starting pitcher, you got a bad game. You don't have your best stuff, yada, yada. You start bad, you finish bad.
Yeah.
Not Jalen.
I do love that. You've talked about that for years, too. You're the only guy I've heard talk about that with Jalen, too. And that's so
relentless.
true.
You got to play 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that's his greatest trait. But if you're being honest in evaluation of the quarterback position, which was the question and the comment, yes, last year was not his best season. But I think if you ask most people, and the grifters, as I like to call them, all the people that enrage the fan base, they say one week you say he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, and next week he's a top 5 quarterback. At least I'm consistent.
Well, I'm not accusing you of grifting. No,
he's a damn good quarterback in the down times, and he's a damn good quarterback in the high times. Is he better than Joe Burrow? I've said it consistently. No, he's not. I don't care about
from a raw talent standpoint. Yeah, but I don't know.
From a
raw
playing
talent overrated.
No, from a playing the position standpoint. I don't care about raw talent. If raw talent was it, Caleb Williams would be the best quarterback in the NFL. He's not. From a playing the position standpoint, to me, Joe Burrow is the best in the NFL right now. And other people would make the argument of Lamar or Patrick Mahomes, whatever. They're in the conversation. Josh Allen as well. Favorite flavor, all that type of stuff. But from a pure evaluation standpoint, He's a very good player. He was a very good player after the Carolina game. He's a very good player after the Super Bowl. But I'm also not going to make these grandiose because he won the Super Bowl. And like I say the same thing, it's the only position. And I don't even want to go down this route, and I did it to myself. It's the same. You could do it with any other position. I always bring up Josh Sweat, who had a great Super Bowl, but nobody's out there saying he's the best edge rusher in football because it's dumb. He's a very good quarterback. Is he in that top 4 level? No. Is he right under it? Yes.
I think
And
he's 5.
with
I
a
happen to
couple
think he
other guys.
manages. I happen to think he manages the different nature of each game has its own personality. Each season has really its own personality. I think Jalen handles that better than most quarterbacks. I think even he handles it better than Lamar Jackson. I mean, everybody talks about Jalen has all this talent. Lamar Jackson has a lot of talent around him, John. He's got a lot of
That's
talent
why I
around
keep
him.
picking
Yeah.
Baltimore every year. And one year he will break through, and everybody will
I-
shut up
we'll
about
see.
Lamar Jackson.
We'll see.
Everybody will shut up about him magically. And he might play poorly that year. But if he wins the Super Bowl, everybody will recognize him as being the player he is, which to me is a terrible
Yeah.
way to evaluate a football
I agree. I
player.
agree with you when you say stuff like that. I mean, that makes sense to me. The one thing that, I do get a kick out of this because we have people right now, some people are, oh, Jalen's better than Burrow. And then there's other people in the chat, oh, Joe Burrow is a top dog. And I agree. Joe Burrow is one of the best quarterbacks in football and will probably be headed to the Hall of Fame, whether he wins a Super Bowl or not. But Joe Burrow won 8 games last year because he didn't have a good defense. So, but my point of this is a little different than what we've talked about. People like use Jalen's good team to take away from Jalen. And I'm like, no other quarterback wins without a good team except maybe Mahomes.
I say it all the time. No,
all right, Joe Burrow is great. He doesn't need a great team.
Patrick Mahomes didn't win shit without a great team. He had a bad offensive line twice, and it was his 2 worst games on the biggest stage.
That's true. But I do feel like there's a little bit of like Mahomes won a Super Bowl last year with who were his receivers.
There is nobody has ever won a Super Bowl with a bad supporting cast.
Yes,
nobody
correct.
in the history of football. Nobody has won a Super Bowl with a bad supporting cast. Nobody. Sometimes the supporting cast overwhelms the quarterback, like the Giants with their front, like Baltimore with Trent Dilfer. Go all the way back to Jeff Hostetler with the Giants. Nobody has ever won a Super Bowl without a great supporting cast. But where I would say, yes, it happens all the time that, quarterbacks will be elevated for winning the Super Bowl. But, quarterbacks are also, as you just brought up with Joe. Well, Joe only won 8 games. Yeah, it ain't a vacuum, people. We're evaluating play-to-play position of the quarterback. He can't win it by himself. And if you look at everybody, Lamar might be ahead of him. Again, there's favorite flavor. Josh Allen was the MVP. And you can make strong cases like Josh Allen, tremendous player. He's a little bit too reckless for me. Nobody's perfect. But from play to play and that's how Tom Brady defines himself. That's how Peyton Manning defined himself. So that's how I define quarterback play. From play to play, I think Joe Burrow's the best quarterback in the NFL. Does that mean he's going to win every year? No. I guarantee you'd love Joe Burrow in Philadelphia. If you had never heard of Jalen Hurts, I guarantee Philadelphia fans would think he's pretty fucking good.
Right. This is like, I agree with your point about Burrow because I think he's excellent too. But I mean, this is the part I hate. Like Brandon Lewis says, Burrow dropped 43 passing touchdowns. Wake me up when Jalen does. Like, I think that is
It's
such
a
a
situation, but it works both ways. Again, Yes, they're a higher volume passing team. But on the other hand, they need to be a higher volume passing team because they have no running game. So it works both ways.
And that's it's also the quarterback skill set, right? I mean, Jalen does other things
it's
well.
also his skill set. But if they had Saquon Barkley, he wouldn't be throwing for that much. Now he'd still be throwing for more, but if they had if they had the Eagles' offensive line and Saquon Barkley, they wouldn't be as high volume. They'd be a little bit more, but not to the degree they are now. That's the problem. Football's not in a vacuum. So it's not about who won the Super Bowl. It's about who performs it. The old Belichick description: do your job. Do your job. Who does their job the best? At edge rusher, it's Myles Garrett. How many games did Cleveland win last year? 3? I don't know. Because of the nobody. I can drop that all the time and say Myles Garrett is the best edge rusher in football. And there's some other guys in the conversation, but nobody bats an eye. This team's shit. But everybody,
good.
But everybody knows how good that particular player is. And it's easy to do at every position except quarterback. There are a bunch of teams, there are a bunch of quarterbacks, not a bunch, but there are quarterbacks who, and even if you want to go down to middle of the road quarterbacks, and I use Derek Carr, he's not even middle, he's well above average because he just retired. And those guys are shat on. That guy's a damn good quarterback for a lot of years that played in a lot of bad situations. And pretty much every season for Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins would be in that conversation too in his prime. Their teams won a couple more games than they probably should have because they were damn good players. But nobody recognizes it because, well, he didn't win a Super Bowl. He didn't win a Super Bowl.
How do you quantify or how do you grade or how do you assess the football intangibles of quarterbacks? And what I mean by that is, Dak Prescott's a guy who's talked about a lot in Philadelphia, and he's really a great quarterback. I mean, let's be real. Dak Prescott throws the ball all over the yard. He's got a great arm. It gets rid of the football, puts up a lot of passing yards. I think he's a great quarterback. But when the moments get big, Dak seems to be a shrinking violet. Another guy, Justin Herbert, great talent, great arm, great, ability, handles the team well, gets to the playoffs, 4 interceptions. How do you quantify like that stuff? Maybe it's not at all. I'm asking you personally.
Well, it depends on, again, you have to look at the situation. Like there was the one playoff game. I think it was against Green Bay, but I don't remember. But if you remember,
for Dak?
Yeah, Dak was the Cowboys.
The
Cowboys were trying to come back, and they were trying to tie the game essentially with a last-second drive. And there was a play where they ran up to the line of scrimmage because they were out of timeouts, and he grabbed the football and spotted it as a veteran NFL quarterback, which the officials have to spot it. So savvy players know, hand the ball to the official as quickly as possible.
Right.
And he didn't do that. And it cost the little time that they had. That's the kind of stuff that bothers me. That's bad. Now, on the other hand, you look at some of these quarterbacks and some of the offensive line issues, and you saw it twice in the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. You've now seen it twice in the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. And I say it on this show a million times, and I'll say it for 1,000,001. If you cannot block people, you cannot play offense. Now, a lot of Eagles fans used that against Patrick Mahomes last year, which was a pathetic performance. Okay, I don't necessarily. How could you say Patrick Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks in football? How could you not? After watching him play. In that particular game, he looked like garbage. Why did he look like garbage? because he is garbage or because the Chiefs could literally not block the Eagles' front?
Right.
Which makes more sense to you? And it happened the same thing when they lost to Tampa Bay. It was the same thing happened.
It's the latter. The latter makes sense. A lot of context in football, John. I love it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts about it. So much context to every part of it.
The best team I've ever seen did not win the Super Bowl. And that's
07 Patriots?
2007 Patriots. And they didn't win the Super Bowl, not because Tom Brady shit the bed on the biggest stage, because they could not block the Giants' front.
Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. Plenty of good conversations here about quarterbacks. We got a couple follow-ups from Rashid Mixon, who asked our original question about the regression to the mean for Hurts. Great question, Rashid. You sparked a long discussion. He followed up with 2 super chats, so I'll read them both. Rashid Mixon follows up. It's tough, J-Mac. I seen the passing ranking, but completing 70% of your passes, limited turnovers, and a 103.7 QBR is not a bad season. And that kind of goes to my point of he played good for what the team needed him to be. John, your response to that?
Yeah, I didn't say he had a bad season. I said it wasn't his best season. I've said pretty consistently he's a very good player. I said if you're being objectively, he played better in clearly he played better in 2022. 2023, people say, well, they collapsed. But individually, he played better. Now, I get why people aren't going to see that because of the collapse, which had more to do with the defense, but I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. To Rashid's point, though, that was his highest QBR ever. It was his highest completion percentage ever, and it was his least amount of interceptions ever.
Well,
so, they asked him to do a lot less, though. There's a lot less.
Yeah, I'm glad, people always want it one way. Why is his completion percentage, whatever it was, 68.7?
68.7.
He's throwing the football 14 times against the Giants. He's throwing the football 20 times against Dallas. He's throwing the football 19 times against Baltimore. He's throwing the football 21 times against Carolina. There's all these little games. His high point was 38. There's some quarterbacks that have to throw it 38 every week. And what is that going to do? It's going to expand turnovers. One of the reasons they scaled back was because they were turning the football over. He had 5 interceptions last year. 4 of them came in the first 3 weeks. He could have had 4 alone in Green Bay and Brazil, if you remember the ugliness of that game.
Right.
One of the major reasons they scaled back, which, by the way, I thought was unfair, again, and he threw 1 interception in the regular season the rest of the way. Part of the reason why is because they overreacted to those early turnovers. And part of the reason they overreacted to those early turnovers was because he had the spike in turnovers the year prior, and they were saying, oh, shit. And it was a panic, to be honest. And so there's a give and take both ways. Yes. When you don't throw the ball, Elliott, we joked about Elliott and his passing statistics at OTAs. Jalen was 20 of 21. They were all dump offs. Like, show me the context. Why do you think, passing completion percentages as a whole in the modern NFL are so much better than they were in the old days when people would actually throw the football down the field? And they'd have completion percentages in the 50s because the game has changed. I don't even know, to be honest, where Rashid is on this. I thought he was originally, it wasn't his best season. Now he seems to be insinuating it was his best season. I don't know where you are, Rashid. It was not his best season. He would be the first to tell you that. Team-wise, it was. And that's all that matters because they won the Super Bowl. Individually, I'm talking about. It was not his best season.
Here's Rashid again. I think he said this before you responded, obviously, that. But he said, I think the frustration came from not passing and the coach's decision not to pass and run. Ran for 3,000 yards, but completion percentage and QBR was at its highest. Yeah, it's kind of tied together in a way.
Well, of course, they had the 6th best rushing season in NFL history. They were a run-first team, which Philadelphia loves, by and large, most. They had the greatest rushing season in history from a particular player. History. So, yeah, the running game, makes it easier for any quarterback, from a standpoint of stuff like completion percentage and things like that. But yeah, if you're going, and again, I encourage anybody can go search for it. Tom Brady's great lengthy discussion.
Yeah.
On how he evaluated himself as a quarterback. It has nothing to do with anything you're talking about. I'm not picking on you, Rashid. Do I get my team in the best position on this particular play as a quarterback?
And couldn't you argue he did that very well last year, despite the numbers being down, despite, it not being his best season? Team won the Super Bowl. Team dominated offensively. Team dominated the NFC title game, dominated the Super Bowl. How do they do that if their quarterback's not getting them in the right place?
Well, he ended the season with 2 tremendous games. Nobody's arguing it.
Well, he also, John, after the bye week, brother, the only game they lost was when he got hurt. I mean, they won every game too. I understand it wasn't his best statistical year, but you could make the argument he got his team in the right place. Even if the plays weren't, asking him to be great, it was Saquon Barkley or the O-line or any of the other things, right? Do you see what I'm saying with that?
Well, again, it goes back down to that when we say it's not winning the game from the standpoint of evaluating a player individually. It's from evaluating a team individually. It's winning the game. That's all that matters. From evaluating, it's not like the Eagles coaches when they're grading film. Oh, we won, so everybody's
right,
great.
So this play doesn't matter. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So, the result is the result, and the result, Jalen Hurts is a big part of it. What we just been talking about this whole show, how many good players they have. I mean, I don't know how many times I can say it. I can say that nobody's winning the Super Bowl by themselves. Nobody's winning a Super Bowl as a quarterback with a bad supporting cast. That's bullshit. If anybody says it about anybody in the history of the game, no one has ever won a Super Bowl with a bad supporting cast. Other guys contribute to that. Most notably, even Saquon Barkley will tell you, and vice versa. It's always, if you ask Saquon, it's the offensive line. If you ask the offensive line, they'll tell you it's Saquon. That's part of it. They have arguably one of the top 3 or 4 receivers in football. They may have the best wide receiver 2 in football. They may have a top 5 tight end when he's healthy. They had one of the best pass rushers in football last year. They had an all-pro at linebacker for the first time in forever. They had Darius Slay, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean in the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, they had a lot of good players. Nobody's saying that.
I mean, this is one of the best teams ever, as Saquon recently said. And I don't like comparing because it's a completely different game. So I just say in the modern era, it's right there as one of the best 2 or 3 teams I've ever seen. I still lean towards a team that didn't win is the best team I've ever seen. And that's the 07 Patriots. But this is one of the best teams ever. And Jalen Hurts is a big part of that. But did he have his best individual season? No, he did not. And I expect him to play better next season because I expect him to regress back to his mean, which is better than he played last season. And I think part of it will be Kevin Patullo won't muck up the works like they were trying to do last year early in the season and just build the offense around the strengths of Jalen Hurts from moment one instead of oh, it's not working, let's scale it back, for a lot of reasons. So I don't know if people are hearing that because they usually don't. I think he's going to play better this season. And everybody said, well, they're winning the Super Bowl. Not necessarily. I think he individually is going to play better this season than he played last season.
So what are the questions on this defense then coming into this year? Or not the defense, no, excuse me, offense, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say there's a shitload on the defense.
No, yeah, not defense. I'm talking offense. We just
on
talked
the
about
offense.
the
Yeah, I mean, on the offense, it's like, all right, you know, how do you? It's mainly the passing game. Let's be honest. You know, cut the charade. You know, you can't be 31st and well, I guess you can be. They won.
Well, what if, John? What if Saquon goes crazy again?
I think they're still going to be better in the passing game, even if Saquon goes crazy. I think they're going to be better because I don't think they're going to muck up the works with the motion and the blah, blah, and the scheme guy. You got to scheme guys up. Got to scheme guys up, Xander. No, you got to execute. And I think all this evolution and you have to do this and you have to do this because the Rams do this and that, I think that goes away. I think they're back to the mentality they had in the past. And I think this will be a top 5 offense. And it'll be more balanced. It'll be more consistent in the passing game. Now, a lot of it has to do with injuries and all that, but I'm projecting everybody being healthy. And it's going to look better. Now, again, is that going to translate into another Super Bowl? Not necessarily, because I don't expect them to have the number 1 defense.
Right.
And it's a complementary game. And part of the reason why, you know, it's going to look a little bit better is they're probably going to be behind a little bit more, and they're probably going to need to pass the football a little bit more. But to me, it's not about stats. For people who watch the show, I'm not a stats guy. You know, some tell you some, but you need the context with everything. And it's not about being a top 10 passing offense or being the top 5 offense. It's about efficiency. And for the most part, the Eagles were very efficient last year on both sides of the football. They won every game basically after the bye week. And the only game they lost, as you pointed out, Jalen got hurt. But, you know, they have a high standard. And I'm not gauging thing on the standards of an 8-8 team or an 8-9 team now. I'm gauging things on their standard. And their standard is higher than what they performed at. And by the way, you should like that because they won the Super Bowl, not reaching their own standard, which is pretty impressive.
All right. Rashid, one more follow-up from Rashid. Thank you for the super chats today, brother. One of our great supporters here on Jacob Sports. Rashid, appreciate you, brother. He says, not his best season. Previous 3 were better. Just wasn't terrible like a lot of people make it seem. Which is basically
I've
what
never
Scott's
said
been
it was
saying.
terrible. Yeah.
Well, it's basically what you said today.
Yeah.
You know, he had better seasons. It wasn't terrible, but not his personal best, which I agree with. Keys checks in. 103.7 was his passer rating, not his QBR. 103.7 QBR would have been the best ever. Jalen's QBR was low last year. That's John's point.
Yeah, well, I don't care about QBR, to be honest, or I don't care. Passer rating's one of the worst stats in history because it doesn't take into account anything other than passing. And obviously you have so many dual threat quarterbacks. So I'm not even paying attention to the stats, but no, I mean, yeah, that's not why I don't think he had because his QBR wasn't high or as high as it should have been is not the reason I think he played. He has played better in the past. I think anybody who thinks Jalen Hurts' 2024 season was his best season is just basing it all on they won the Super Bowl. I do. I don't. There's no credible argument to say it was his best season.
Yeah, I don't. I think most don't think that 24 was his best season, but it did result in the Super Bowl, which obviously does, as you just pointed out, does shade some people's thoughts on it. Johnny Mac, great show today, brother. We talked all defense extensively in hour number 1, and then we broke into the offense with Jalen Hurts and kind of what we expect from him this year. So a great week of shows, though. OTAs kicked off. The Birds are out there today, right, Johnny Mac, for an OTA?
Yeah, another rain-soaked day for the Birds.
Yep.
Hopefully it clears up. We will not be there, though, so no reporters today, but they will be on the field for their third OTA.
Yep, no doubt about it. Johnny Mac, great stuff. Great shows this week. I'm looking forward to seeing what's the schedule next week? You're out there Tuesday, you said? You're on the
most likely they're Monday, Tuesday, Thursday next week is their 3 OTAs. Most likely we'll be out there Tuesday. Not 100%, but certainly 99%, I would say.
Yeah. Good stuff. So plenty of stuff that we'll talk about, plenty of things that are happening here with this team, plenty of great storylines when it comes to the position battles, when it comes to the offense, when it comes to the defense, really is where most of the questions exist on this football team, but still plenty to talk about. John, just a few minutes left on the show today. Anything we didn't talk about from OTAs that's on your mind? I think we hit it all, but maybe I missed something, John. Anything on your mind that we didn't hit on?
I think we hit it all. Certainly, I can't think of anything off the top of my head I didn't get to.
Andre Sam, did we give Andre Sam enough love, or what's the
Well,
wide
I did.
receiver? Danny Gray.
I mentioned Danny a lot yesterday. He's a player to keep an eye on because it depends what the Eagles want. Like, if they want more receiving acumen in their backups, deeper backups, Danny Gray's going to have a chance to make this team. But if they want Johnny Wilson's blocking ability, if they want Anaya Smith's return ability, different things when you're talking about reserves, different things. What do you want? Basically, who can you get on the practice squad? Do you think somebody will get claimed? All of that comes into it. But I think, if you and most fans are going to look at receivers and think about receiving. And I think Danny Gray is probably their 4th best receiver after the top 3. So
there you go. Yeah.
And then safety, I mentioned every single safety got, the big 5, I guess you call them, because Reed wasn't there. Sidney Brown, Andrew Makuba, Andre Sam, Tristan McCullum, and even Lewis Seen got first-team reps. So they were rotating. As far as rolling guys through, safety was the most where the most guys got looks. Like they were giving a look to everybody, which could be good, could be bad, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah. Johnny Mac, great stuff, man. Your final thoughts here on this Football Friday. Basically just gave them, but just wrapping up the week here on Birds 365, a short one with Memorial Day on Monday, and we'll be back this Monday coming up in a couple days from now.
Yeah,
June 1st. It'll be June 2nd on Monday. I can't believe it.
I know. June 1st, big day. I'll end it there. June 1st, big day in the NFL. Not as big as it used to be because some changes, but still for the Eagles, they're getting a little bit of cap space as for the post June 1st designations of Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Bryce Huff, something could happen with him. Interesting to see how long Howie will kick that down the road.
My guess is Bryce Huff's going nowhere.
Well, James Bradbury, I can see why you think that. To me, it's interesting. Like James was a good soldier. Like that's the difference to me. Like James, like he didn't show up to voluntary work, but mandatory work. He was there all up, during the season, even though they were coming up with injuries every 2 seconds, he was there helping the younger guys sort of, to the point where Christian Parker and some of the other DB coaches are saying maybe coaching is in his future. He was a solid part of the team, even though people didn't see it. I don't get that feeling with Bryce Huff. So that's a little bit different.
Johnny Mac, great shows this week, brother. Enjoy your weekend. I hope you have I don't know if the weather is not very good, but hopefully you get some time outside. You get to do whatever you need to do. John, hope you have a great weekend, brother. Great shows this week. I'll talk to you on Monday. Thank you, brother.
All right. Thanks all. Enjoy the weekend.
All right. There's Johnny Mac, John McMullen, the #1 Eagles beat reporter in town. Give him a follow at JF McMullen. All right. Read all his work at Sports Illustrated and watch him here on Jacob Sports on Birds 365. Great show. We've had a great community. We've been building, by the way, on Birds 365, man. We've been absolutely crushing it. Was analyzing and crunching some numbers on this offseason versus last offseason and everything that's this show has built. So I can't thank all of you guys enough who watch this show day in and day out. If you're here every day, if you're here a couple days a week, I appreciate you very much, man. So thank you so much. Hit the like button. All right. I do want to ask you guys before I get out of here. All right. And selfishly, I'll tell you this. My 12-day-old baby niece is in the building. So I'm not going to stay here a long time on Xander time. All right. I want to hold my beautiful baby niece. Talk to my brother who I haven't chatted with in a little bit, man. He's been it's fun talking to him right now. Obviously, he's a new father and everything. So I want to talk to him a little bit. But what's everybody got going on this weekend, man? I hope everybody has a great weekend set up in front of them. I hope everybody enjoys their weekend. We'll be back here on Monday. All right. I told you guys I'm going to be getting out of here. So bring her on camera. My brother won't let that fly. He watched so I don't know if any of you guys watched the Sean Ryan show. I don't know if my brother does either, but he watched Tim Tebow was on there talking about like some crazy stuff with child trafficking and stuff. And I'm not going to go into that right now because it's a very heavy subject, but my brother wants to keep his daughter off the internet, and I respect that. I respect that. But she's in the building. She's in the building. Kennedy Krause. I'm ready to go see her. Baby Kennedy. I love her. She's absolutely beautiful. Can I tell you guys that? She is absolutely beautiful. Kennedy Krause. She is beautiful. Looks like my brother. She really does. She got dark hair, just like my brother. She came out of the womb, man, full head of hair. The doctors, first thing they said, whoa, she's got full head of hair. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Get out, Xander. Go be with your family. Kimberly, good to see you in here. Enjoy. I'll take a couple minutes on Xander time here. Izzy B says she has a cookout on Sunday. Nice, Izzy B. Enjoy that. Sounds pretty fun. Joe Whip's in here. What's up, Joe? Hope you're doing well, brother. I know you're enjoying this time of the year with the golf. All right. It's golf season. Although the weather, Joe, weather hasn't been great, man. Weather hasn't been great. Ray Lester, enjoy Z. See you Monday. Ray, thank you, brother. Where's my boy Rashid Mixon, man? He's in here. Great job. Great comments from Rashid Mixon today, too. Super chats to support the show and great takes as well. Gave us some great talking that we had there in hour number 2. I think all good things, too. My thing with Jalen is I think, and you guys know about how I always say this, and I think I saw Texas T comment in the chat a little earlier. Everybody's like putting him in this box. And I don't think we remember 4 years, guys. That's how long he's been a starter. You can't write somebody's career in 4 years. The fact that he's had the success he's had in 4 years, and last year was the first year he had no Jason Kelce, where he was handling everything at the line of scrimmage. Like, dude, Jalen Hurts might just be getting started. Think about that. That is not far-fetched to say he's just getting started. And we've been to 2 Super Bowls and won one with him. I think the guy's on a fast track to being the greatest football player in Philadelphia history. Now, you might not like Jalen Hurts. You might have your issues. Brandon Lewis was pointing out how Joe Burrow throws 45 times. It doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter what my opinion, what John's opinion, what Brandon Lewis's opinion is. Jalen Hurts is on a fast track right now to being the most iconic athlete in Philadelphia history. And I don't think that's far-fetched. 4 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl, a Super Bowl MVP. Already? Guys, he's 26. He's 26 or 27, I think he turns soon. I mean, this dude's got another 10 years at least. What does he, if he accomplished that in the first 4, what can he accomplish in the next 10? Now, maybe it won't be as good, but I think the guy's entering his prime, man. And I think it's a blessing for us to have him in Philly. And it's you know, blessing to be able to watch his career grow. All right. Brandon says, I'm off to do a week's worth of errands. Good stuff. All right, everybody. I love you all, man. Appreciate each and every one of you. Hit the like button. I thought we had great, entertaining shows this week. As always, D Hughes, I saw your DM this morning. So D Hughes was in here clapping back at me. He's like, you're sleeping on Shai Gilgeous. All right. So he sends me like a 5-minute montage of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander looking like Kobe Bryant. D Hughes, he's a good player. He's not Kobe Bryant. All right. Come on, man. Listen, just like I just said about Hurts, though, brother, he's a young player, man. He's got a long time to write the story still. All right. So I'll be locked in, though, in the NBA Finals for sure. I'll be locked in. I think the Knicks won last night, right? I was watching the hockey game last night. I've been loving the hockey. Oilers, they're going back. Repeat of the Stanley Cup Finals with the Oilers versus the Panthers. Where's my boy Bombay Trippy? Big Panthers fan. All right. Big Panthers fan. That's going to be a good one. I'm curious to see. I know this is going to be like anti-American, and I chirp our Canadians in here all the time, but Connor McDavid is such an unbelievable hockey player that I kind of want him to win it all. I know that's messed up, but he's so unbelievable. I want him to win, but we'll see what happens. All right. Love all you guys. Appreciate all of you guys. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. The show's been killing it. This offseason has been great. Hit the like button for me. We've been slacking a little bit on the like button, but hit that like button for me. Appreciate all of you guys. Have a beautiful, great, blessed weekend. I hope you can do whatever you do. God bless you all, and see you next time on Birds 365. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at Jacob Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.